Welcome to the Inventory Professional Podcast, brought to you by InventoryBase, providers of industry-leading property inspection software, accredited training, and on-demand property reports. Join us as we discuss the latest news, legislation, and all things property, hosted by our very own inventory expert, Sián Metcalf. With regular special guests, listen in to our open and honest discussions about the role of the inventory professional and how to navigate through this ever-changing, fast-paced industry.
So welcome to the Inventory Professional. I'm joined today with a very special guest host, Antony Stewart from First Ards Peninsula Property Management in Northern Ireland. Good afternoon, Antony. How are you?
Afternoon. I'm fine, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, really, really good. We were just discussing before we started about how good the weather is today. It makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Yes, the blue sky makes it nice to get up in the morning and get the ball moving.
It does, definitely. But I just hope everyone still heeds the government advice and just stays at home now. I know it's really tempting to be out and about. I mean, obviously you can still do the odd walk, for exercise, etc. But you need to still kind of like keep to the guidelines, as nice as it might be. And if you've got a benefit of a garden, maybe try and enjoy it, that side of things. But you still got to keep at home and safe as much as possible.
That's a big thing. Staying safe and following the government guidelines is the only way forward at the moment. And I think if a lot of people do that, we can get this over and done with a lot faster.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, funny enough, it was a conversation on another podcast I've done with other host, Melissa. We were talking about how difficult it is for people in our position, i.e. inventory professionals, having to stay in and the effect it has on our business and what we can and can't do. And I know we discussed previously about the fact that, yes, we're not an essential service. It's something I do kind of mention quite often in the podcast, certainly at the moment. However, people still need to move. So there is some argument to say, well, the government do say that we can go to work if we can't work at home, and clearly our role doesn't allow us to do that. However, we still got to be very, very careful. But one of the reasons that I invited yourself on, Antony, was because I understand you're doing something slightly different with your time at the moment.
Yes, so basically through the property management, everything is a bit back to front at the moment, because what we're trying to do is minimise the amount of personal contact as possible. So what we're trying to do is, obviously the property portals have increased for viewings overall, literally doubled in fact, and people are looking at properties to still move and relocate. So what we're kind of doing is doing everything beforehand, with the applications, making sure the tenants are suitable for the property. And then once we get to that stage, we then do virtual viewings, which we'll discuss in more detail. And with that gives them the facility to basically look around the property as a video. So what we can do is then shortlist again to the final applicants. And then at that stage, we know the application has been accepted, that the home net reference has came back correct and good. The applicants already have seen the property in virtual view. So basically we're taking every step we can to follow the government guidelines to minimise the amount of personal contact before we even get to the viewing stage. Now, just to give you an example, the last property I had on the market, we had 37 applicants applied for the property. By the time we got the virtual viewing, we had shortlisted that down to 3.
Oh, okay. That's quite a big drop. Is that because people have dropped out, or maybe can't proceed, or don't want to proceed?
Several different reasons. Some would have been location, some would have been the actual what the property offered, because the actual individual property was an upstairs, downstairs. So again, that ruled out some people, because obviously they didn't like the fact that every day you go in the house, you have to go up the stairs for main living.
Oh, okay. I see. So it'd be like a maisonette type.
That's it, and it basically was built that way because of the views from the front room.
Mm-hmm.
So what the owners have done with the property is basically built the property around the views.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, some people liked that idea, some people didn't like that idea. So that's where the virtual viewing became a brilliant feature, because that gave the facility to actually shortlist and save a lot of time taking several viewings around the property on individual visits. So as a property management company, the time saving was absolutely amazing. And then, as I say, we then shortlisted down to 3 people. Them 3 people basically then went and done an actual viewing at the property. And one of the applicants has been successful and has rented.
Okay, but was that pre-lockdown or during the lockdown?
That was during the lockdown. That was literally 2 days ago.
Okay,
So,
but you're finding doing those streamlined virtual videos, those viewings online is helping you to manage those applications.
Definitely. And I think it is something that once all the coronavirus all goes out of play, I think the virtual viewings will stay in place, because even on the rental market or for the sale market, it gives a good idea of the property before you even get to that final stage. So time saving is unbelievable, because once you've done one virtual viewing, you can record the video, and any other new viewers, you can actually just link up the video to Zoom. Mm-hmm. And basically talk through the video with the new vendor or the new rental applicant. So you've actually only got to do the one video once and use it over and over again.
Yeah, so, and then just share it with all the other applicants. I mean, to give a bit of context, and it's something I should have asked you or should have mentioned beforehand, is your background is actually in inventory reports, isn't it?
Yeah, so just to give you a bit of feedback, a bit of information from myself, I ran an inventory company in London for several years, with up to 16 self-employed clerks. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the company is still running, but they've minimised the clientele. So I've moved on, relocated to Belfast, and obviously opened up my own property management. Now, the property management in Northern Ireland is nowhere close to where we are in the UK mainland. So legislation, basically with the overall regulations. So things like smoke alarms, CO2 alarms are not compulsory over here.
Right, because I thought that they mirrored what we had here in the UK, being Northern Ireland.
They've kind of mirrored, but what they've done, they haven't actually made it a legislation.
Oh, okay.
So they're making it as not compulsory advisories, but they're making them as advisories. So they recommend this is what we should have. But again, there's nowhere on paperwork stating that is legislation.
And how do you actually, so how do landlords manage that side of things? Do you find that they put them in anyway because it's just really good health and safety practice, or are you finding that you're having to kind of help inform or even maybe insist in some respects? How are they managing that side of things?
I would definitely say at the moment it is literally up to the property agent to assist and force the landlord to do that and to follow, the recommendations as close as possible. So the only thing they do have in legislation over here is you have to have a gas safety certificate.
Right, so that is a requirement then.
That is a requirement. Again, there's no requirement for electrical certificates.
Okay, but that's something that is coming in from our point of view. So I'm wondering if that will potentially move over to your side of things and become a requirement, same as gas safety. But what also about things like Legionella risk assessments, which under HSE guidance is required, although in the main most landlords don't seem to either want them or have them. Do you have anything like that?
No, there's nothing like that over here in play at the moment. To give you a bit more feedback, over here, estate agents, property managers, property agents don't even have to be registered as an RLA certificate. So anyone unqualified can basically start this employment and open up their own business with no qualifications.
Well, certainly here in the UK, that is being looked at, and they've got recommendations going through so that agents will have to have qualifications, that they will have to be certificated, properly qualified. But when that is actually going to come in and be enforced is another matter, especially with what's going on at the moment. I think a lot of kind of government requirements and ideas and certainly policy that they'd like to bring in is put on a bit on the back burner, which is quite understandable. But I think the kind of timeline looking for that side is around about 2 years, and it's something that's certainly being pushed forward by a lot of the bigger bodies like the Arla property market. But it's not quite there yet, but it is definitely coming. But there are legislation requirements regards money protection, deposits protection, etc. So there is some ability from the government side to kind of control to a certain degree what agents are doing and not doing.
Yeah, just to give you an overall, the Northern Ireland and Ireland seem to be roughly about 5 years behind the UK mainland. Mm-hmm. You said about deposits. It's only 1 year ago. It was about 5 years ago TDS came in over here, but no one ever used them until about a year ago. I can see there within the last 2 months, my deposits is starting to get more popular over here. So again, because obviously them schemes were not in place, a lot of the deposits were just kept by the individual landlord.
Okay, so how has that been managed in regards to things like disputes, or has it been more of a case of just managing between the tenant and the landlord direct?
Well, really, up until about a year ago, there was no such thing really as disputes over here. Mm-hmm. So what the individual landlords would have done, say the property was valued at £600 per month, what they would have done was they would have marked it at £650 per month.
Yeah.
The landlord then would have kept that extra £50, and that would have went at the end of the tenancy to do any work that needed done. So there was no claims ever put forward because the landlord just used that extra £50 per month.
So more like a savings scheme than anything else.
That's it, basically. But now that obviously legislation has came into play over here, that the deposit now has to be located with a tenant deposit scheme that has rolled that out. Mm-hmm. And obviously the rental market here is getting bigger. So there's more competition out there. So, the landlords haven't got that leeway anymore to charge that additional amount because no one will rent because they can get one down the road £50 cheaper if they're following the correct procedures.
Okay, that's really interesting to see. There's such a big difference between us and yourselves. So if that's the case, then how do you operate or have operated in regards to inventory reports, or is that why you've been looking at additional services like the virtual viewing?
Inventory reports are very difficult because over here it is a new thing.
Concept.
And before I started the property management, we're looking through all the different agents' inventory reports. It consisted of maybe an A4 Word document with 6 pages. Mm-hmm. Now the problem you have with that is obviously it doesn't give enough evidence to support any claim put forward at the end of the tenancy.
Yeah.
For the deposit schemes. So that's where the issue is. So what I'm doing now with my landlords is I'm basically speaking to them and discussing what an inventory has to entail, and why it needs to be so detailed, to support obviously any evidence put forward at the checkout stage.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as it's explained to them, they understand the importance of it. There's other things, I offer several interim reports throughout the tenancy, and again, none of the tenants ever disagree with it because it gives them a chance to put forward any problems throughout the actual tenancy. And so, if there's any appliance that's not working. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I think that we've got a slight delay in our feed, so sorry if I interrupted you there. I was just going to ask you about the interim because InventoryBase had just launched a tenant self-serve interim inspection report to be available to them during the lockdown, because obviously we can't go into properties because it's not safe to do so. It's not safe for the tenant or for the clerk. So they've introduced a self-service template so that effectively the tenant can highlight any issues. They can also take pictures or video of the property, say to the landlord or agent, look, everything's fine, this is, it's in good order, everything is being kept well, or there's issues, etc. How are you managing that side of things in lockdown?
It is good. Again, I think this is where the Zoom will come into play to support that report. And I think that is a massive feature that needs to be done with the self-service reports. Mm-hmm. Now, from being an inventory clerk myself, the biggest problem is, you walk around several properties and the amount of times a tenant or a landlord will turn around and say, oh, right, I wouldn't have never have seen that, so I don't think that they would be as in detailed and, offer several items that should be listed on there. They might bypass certain things that shouldn't be on the list, but I think where we are at the moment with the current situation of the COVID-19, I think it is one way that we can, carry on working and obviously follow the government guidelines.
Yeah, it's certainly giving potential options to both sides of the tenancy, i.e. the tenant to let agents and landlords know how the property is, and vice versa. Landlords, agents can then see what the property is being, how it's being maintained, and if there's any issues, how urgent those issues are. Do they need to send someone in, a contractor, to manage those issues, or can they be left until a bit later on or past the lockdown, so that again, safety is a compromise. So I think certainly it gives a lot of flexibility to both sides of the tenancy to make sure that we all kind of come out of it as safe as we possibly can. But certainly goes in towards what you've been saying about using Zoom, looking at different opportunities within what we do as a service as to how we could maybe do things differently, better, or actually use technology. And it certainly seems to be what you're doing at the moment.
Yes, definitely. And, as I said before, I will continue to use them even after everything settles down and we go back to work normally, because there is several things. When I ran the inventory company, we would have always processed the report at the final stage. Mm-hmm. If we had a video to support that would have saved a lot of time, because you've already got a virtual video of the property, so you know exactly what you're looking for. And as we discussed on our last discussion with the pricing procedure for inventories, there's so many times the inventory companies can be caught out due to size. Mm-hmm. And this, where we can have a video of the property, we've got that basically heads up on what the property is going to entail, because several times I've sent clerks out to a property expecting it to be done in an hour and a half, and they've been there 3.5 hours because, okay, the property has got the correct amount of bedrooms, but what the landlord or the agents have not informed us is every room has got a walk-in wardrobe and an ensuite.
Yeah,
So
that's
again,
happened to me quite a few times when I've walked into a property, and your heart almost sinks when you realise that this is going to take a lot longer than you thought. And it's a knock-on effect as well for all your other bookings, for all your other clients, especially if they're timed, like checkouts or check-ins. It can have a huge impact.
definitely, and again, even with the property, if it's furnished or unfurnished, you know, some properties you can go to a 5-bedroom unfurnished, and you can be in and out in less time than what you can with a 2-bedroom fully furnished. So, you know, depending on what the furniture is and obviously the condition of the property. So this is where the video beforehand gives a good heads up of what the actual clerks are going to.
So, question for you then is, obviously, as a say, argument's sake, a sole inventory provider, just a clerk working on their own, it's going to be quite difficult for them to go in and do a video, because they would need to charge for that, because that obviously that takes time, effort, etc. So how would you, as someone who runs a property management company, how would you see that working in regards to that? Would you expect the property manager or the landlord or the agent to do the video, or can you see this as becoming a particular additional service that clerks can add to their portfolio?
Well, I think it could be used for every department. So basically, the property agents could use it for to benefit them to sell the property or to rent the property.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the same video then can be used and it can be sent to the other parties. So, you know, the agent takes the video as their initial inspection when they go in and market the property.
Mm-hmm.
The video can be done at that stage. Then when they obviously put the booking through InventoryBase or however they may book the inventory clerk, that can then be sent by email or again through Zoom, to obviously follow that procedure. Once the inventory company have got that video, they can then upload that to the actual report, so the clerks can actually see the video before they even go to the property, which again, for the preparation, InventoryBase works brilliant if the preparation is done correctly. And I think for InventoryBase to work 100%, the preparation has to be done before the clerk even arrives to the property.
Oh,
so that might be laying out the rooms correctly or whatever. You know, every property is individual, but you know, that's where I focus with my inventory clerks, was aiming to have the report ready to do at the property.
yeah, I mean, obviously that is definitely the ideal way forward, certainly. But we know reality, as we both know, that it doesn't always come out that way. But it's interesting to see that how well you're finding, you know, Zoom, which, to be honest with you, most people seem to be preferring at the moment, in lieu of any other kind of service, that how it's working. But is it very technical? I mean, because not everybody's technically minded. People have different skill levels. How easy do you think, or would you say, Zoom is to use? So from a clerk's point of view.
Personally, I think it is very easy. It is just push a button and you're live, basically, and you can record a video from there. It is very easy to get, used to, and it is very accurate. The last one I done went through on 4G. I had no interruptions, no freezes. The only thing, as we discussed previously, was everyone can see everyone. So if you're doing a live video, if you accept 3 or 4 different applicants, they can actually contact and see who the other applicants are. And my worry with that was confidentiality.
Yes.
And for a property management company, that is a major part of it. And everything has to be confidential.
Yeah, because I'm presuming, obviously, you follow GDPR rules. That's a requirement, even though we're technically not in Europe now, but you're still following that.
Yes, definitely, because until anything has been, changed in theory, Northern Ireland again is a wee bit different, because even though we're out of the EU, we have our own individual parliament. So with this new Brexit coming into play, we've got addendums for every rule over Northern Ireland. So we're still part of, we're no longer in Europe, but we still have to follow Europe guidelines because of being in the having no border with Republic of Ireland. So we're in a very hard situation at the moment, because every rule that has been set, we have an addendum to go with it, and it is just finding where we actually go into play. So until anything is changed and we're notified, then we have to follow the correct procedures.
Yeah, no, I can totally appreciate that, and it's the only way you can do it at the moment, isn't it? Until you're given better advice or guidance, or laws change. So, how have you actually got around this issue then, with potentially, 3, 4, 5 odd tenants on the same call? Is there a way of making sure that confidentiality is maintained, or is it a case of you just have to maybe do the video and then stream it out or give it out to the applicants?
Well, as I say, what I done there was, when you set up a meeting on Zoom, it will actually give you a password. You can then invite individual applicants or individual personnel to join that meeting. So what I've done with the last one was I just invited the first applicant. I then recorded the video, and for all the other applicants afterwards, I done one-on-one viewings using the same video.
Oh, okay.
So everything then was just individual. Now, there's certain things on Zoom you have to make sure. You have to make sure you've got your password set up. Once you invite someone, you can literally copy the invitation to an email. That will then send that applicant or customer a link. They click on the link and that throws them straight into the meeting. It will then have on that link as well the password. So everything is, again, then confidential. So you can only have one applicant join that one meeting. But as I say, that doesn't mean you have to go back to the property 7, 8, 9, 10 times. You can use the same video, but just set up an additional meeting with the video linked up for the new applicant.
No, I think that makes perfect sense, and it certainly adds another dimension to what we do as clerks, because you're basically saying not only can you just do the inventory, it's also about offering almost like a self-service for Zoom for the virtual viewings. And I suppose you could also potentially use that at checkout, as well as to record another video of the property. Yes, you've got to do a report because the adjudications and the deposit schemes want a physical report, but you could also do a video of the property to help showcase and understand what the property is like, especially if maybe it's one of these properties where it's not been maintained and it's not in good order and maybe stuff has been left behind, etc. A video is much better at kind of understanding what the property looks like and where all the issues are, as well as the report itself.
Definitely, I totally agree. And I think the other thing I wanted to say was with the self-service reports, as long as the inventory company are in touch with the actual individual tenant who's compiling the report, there's no reason, while they're compiling the report, there's no reason they couldn't be as a one-on-one viewing through Zoom whilst the tenant is doing the report. So at least the inventory clerk can basically talk through how to complete the report. Again, that's where InventoryBase will be perfect, because InventoryBase is set out in a way where it is designed and it kind of asks you the questions. What is the item? What is the description? What is the condition? It lays it out very, very simply. Where before I came over to Northern Ireland, old inventories used to be done as a paragraph. Mm-hmm. And if you were to ask a tenant to do an inventory on a blank A4 page, they wouldn't know where to start. Where InventoryBase gives them that feature, it tells them what you're looking at, what is the description of the item, what is the condition of the item. It's perfect.
Oh yeah, it certainly lends itself to a whole kind of group of potential users, i.e. tenants, landlords, letting agents, obviously the clerks, which is the most important bit. I mean, I think the difference with tenants doing their own interim and the clerk, obviously it's better for the clerk to do it because we're looking at it quite dispassionately, and we're also looking at it from a point of view of what the property is looking like, as opposed to maybe a tenant just to say, well, okay, I think it's fine, and because they're living there and they have that kind of view, same as like a landlord does when they're maybe renting out their family home. They look at it completely different. And I think certainly with clerks, we tend to look at it from a very fact-based, evidence-based point of view, which obviously will help the adjudicator in any deposit dispute, because it's all about the evidence. It's not about emotion. It's not about how we feel about something. What we think about something is what we can actually prove. Yes,
and and as I always say to tenants when I was compiling reports with them present, I always said to them and to the landlords, we've got to state what we see, and if we can see it with our eyes, then it needs to be on that report. And that's the way I taught all my clerks through the previous company, and put it back to Northern Ireland again. This is where everything's becoming difficult because inventories haven't been done to the right standard. So not only are you having to tell the landlords this is what it needs for legislation for the tenant deposit scheme, it has to be done in a certain way to protect the tenants when it comes to the checkout stage. So you're having to explain what the process is before you can even do the business.
Yeah, so, I suppose because like I said, haven't had that understanding. They've not really had to even think about it in those kind of terms before.
No, and to put it in the picture, over here in Northern Ireland and Ireland, you have 2 inventory companies. That is it throughout the whole country. And only one of them is AIIC registered. Now, I do all my inventories for my properties that I put on through first Ards Peninsula Property Management. Now, I'm not AIIC registered because obviously I cannot offer an independent report because I'm renting them. So again, that's not legislation over here. Legislation states anyone can do an inventory. An individual landlord can do their own inventory for their own property. Mm-hmm. Again, the only thing they state is the tenants should sign. And as you know yourself, InventoryBase offers that facility via email or a shared report. It gives the facility for the tenant to sign. So again, at the moment, where we can't actually physically be next to the tenant, there's no reason why none of the reports can be signed.
I was going to say, you're right, and tenants can sign digitally. And the good thing about the InventoryBase system is the fact that it captures that point of signature to the point where you can showcase when the report was completed, when it was shared, who it was shared with, what time that person opened the report or not, as the case may be. When they made comments, how many comments they made. Then you've got the whole tenant comments section where they can write per field, per item, depending on what they want to say, plus upload pictures. And then they said sign it, which is date timed, and then you've got an email to say that you've done that. So it really is end to end. And certainly from when I started doing inventories back in 2012, those kind of functions were kind of like coming through, but very bitty and not well thought out. Whereas one of the reasons I came over to InventoryBase, because I'm like you, I run my own company, do my own reports, got a bank of clerks we work with, etc., is that I wanted something that was end to end, so you could literally see the complete journey of that report for that property, for that tenant, for that client, so that everybody was covered. Because I'm very much like yourself, it's all about the evidence, it's all about making sure it's done properly, which is one of the reasons I started with InventoryBase, and we started building InventoryBase Academy, which brings me quite neatly on to what we've been discussing before, Antony, is how you're working with InventoryBase and the Academy over in Northern Ireland. Would you like to explain to our listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So recently I've been in discussion with yourself and the directors of InventoryBase to represent InventoryBase in Northern Ireland. And Ireland. Now, as I say, there's only 2 infantry companies over here. And what is happening at the moment is the agents are actually doing the inventories themselves. So what I'm looking to do is approach all the agents and basically put them on the InventoryBase, because it is a self-explanatory report, and using InventoryBase itself will give the information required to do a detailed report to support the landlord and the tenants' obviously deposits securely. It's trying to make the agents aware of what an inventory has to entail to support the correct documentation to support the any claim that was put forward at the checkout stage. Mm-hmm. So you're having to approach the companies with selling 2 features rather than just the one, because first of all you've got to get them to understand and on the same level to understand what an inventory has to entail, and then the second one is obviously put forward the software that InventoryBase offers. And InventoryBase doesn't just offer reports, they offer a full procedure. So they have a full booking schedule, and not as much over in Northern Ireland than Ireland, but in London it had a good map procedure. So as soon as you authorise the clerk to a job, you could see the location of where the clerk was based, and once you put in the property, the maps feature on there give you a kind of time scale of how long it took the clerk to get there. So you can generate your whole diary, your whole organisation, and obviously then onto your reports. So it offers a full package, and as I say, before using it for my previous company doing the inventories, I did realise that it was the best organisation, secure organisation that we could offer at that stage. So it's putting all them things over to all these companies over here to obviously offer the best detailed reports that we can do. And as I say, with only 2 infantry companies out there, I think once the agents start doing their own reports, they'll realise that how much time it actually takes to compile a correct inventory and a checkout. And I think then that will then operate further inventory companies over here once it starts to become a usual process for rentals.
I think certainly the deposits providers, the My Deposits TDS, will also influence that side of things, certainly with agents and landlords, because obviously if deposits disputes then start to escalate, the numbers go up, then that will be a clear indication of maybe that reports maybe are not either doing the job well, or maybe the processes that are in place by the agents aren't doing so well, so they need to look at that. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses, as InventoryBase becomes more well known in Northern Ireland, and obviously I presume then you'll be looking to train your own clerks.
Yes, definitely. That will be the procedure down the line, and I'm hoping it takes off well. And as I say, once it starts getting busier, then we can then look at bringing in individual and independent infantry clerks and progress down that, and then hopefully generate several teams throughout Northern Ireland and Ireland with team leaders in certain areas to progress that to the full potential. But as you say, TDS and My Deposits, the 2 tenant deposit schemes over here, My Deposits are more strict with the inventories at the moment. TDS are getting there. Eamon Hunt, who's the director, he's taken more of a back step at the moment, but they see the procedure of an inventory, they will then follow that through to where my deposits are. Because TDS over here is it's TDS NI, so they're independent for Northern Ireland, so they have never worked in the UK mainland, where my deposits, as you know yourself, are in English, a UK mainland firm. So, they know what they're expecting already, where TDS are still a wee bit behind them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's going to be trial and error initially, and my deposits definitely have a much firmer standing. Although TDS is very big in here in the UK, and certainly they work very closely with Arla Property Mark in order to set standards, guidance, etc. In some respects to inventories, but more about the mainstream letting side of things. But so it'd be interesting to see how those two actually cement their positions over in Northern Ireland. And also it's a good opportunity certainly for yourself and InventoryBase to firm up some really good working relationships to get those reports done to a correct standard, and make sure that everyone is protected, because that's the thing certainly, I think, from both our point of view, and I know we've discussed this before. It'll be interesting to see as TDS and my deposits progress how they actually manage the whole inventory process, because even though TDS and my deposits are quite big over here in the UK, their interactions, I think, certainly with the inventory side of things isn't as good as it could be, and I think it would be much better if they dealt with clerks either by focus groups, giving feedback from actual cases either to the individuals, or better case studies, so that we can understand our role better and help support them in what they're trying to do in regards to inventories and minimising the levels of dispute, because it's no one's interest to go to dispute, but equally you always need the documentation just so that you know exactly where everybody stands. And like you said, a good inventory will enable that, will help people know what is within their responsibility from a landlord point of view and from a tenant point of view. And a lot of also that will be around the training side of things. How do we know what's a good report? How do you navigate a property? What's good evidence? What's bad evidence? What do the deposit bodies want from your report? And again, it'd be nice to get some better clarification on that, and it'd be interesting to see how Northern Ireland managed that side of things.
Yeah, definitely. And as I say, my deposits have got a head start, because my deposits are part of the company from the UK mainland, and as I say, TDS NI are actually only a franchise of the tenant deposit scheme. So, they have never worked with any of the UK mainland agents. So for them, inventories is an A4 size bit of paper with maybe 6 or 7 photographs and 3 or 4 paragraphs, which yourself doesn't give enough evidence to put forward for any claims at the final stage. Where my deposits, they are pushing the fact that a decent, detailed inventory has to be compiled.
It's going to be interesting to see how all that progresses. So, just to recap, I think it's interesting how much applications like Zoom are going to be useful both to InventoryBase in regards to video compilation for the reports, for tenants doing the self-service on the interim, certainly. The virtual viewings is a great idea, certainly to add to the portfolio of clerks, especially in maybe quieter times, but also, like you said, will help inform as to what the property looks like, the size, the number of rooms, etc., so that we're not always going in blind. I know we can get some kind of idea off the agents, sometimes the landlords, or even if we've got a floor plan for the property, but it's not always the case. So it would certainly help to have that video of the property. And another thing that we've just introduced also is pre-checkout reports that tenants can do. So, when you have your checkout discussion, normally it's face to face, and obviously at the moment we can't do that. What we're saying is it'd be a really good idea to give tenants the opportunity, if they haven't had that face to face, or they're choosing, certainly as we go forward, not to be at the checkout report, or because maybe they're working as well, that they've got the opportunity to put down electronically in the notes on the IB system using the app any comments that they want to make, any notes they want to make, pictures, any outstanding issues, anything they want to bring to the attention both of the inventory clerk and also the landlord stroke agent, so that when it comes to that checkout report, because that still needs to be done, it's not a case of either or, it's a little step in the process between the tenant leaving and the checkout being done. And bearing in mind at the moment, TDS are basically saying it can be up to 4 weeks, in the current situation, especially if people are self-isolating because they're part of the shielding initiative. It means then vital information isn't lost. But equally, I was talking to Melissa on another podcast, and we were both saying that the amount of times we've had conversations with tenants and we thought we'd put down what we believe that they were saying, try to do it verbatim, and the tenant will come back, well, actually, it's not quite what I said, or you forgot to mention this, or whatever. The pre-checkout notes gives them that ability to have their say, to put forward any issues or any comments that they want to be noted, plus the pictorial or video evidence. It's all date and time. And that helps feed and become part of, effectively, an evidence bundle for the adjudication process, and or if it actually goes to court, because I think there's a very distinct possibility going forward that we'll see a lot more court action happening, depending on the type of deposit scheme or service that the tenant or the landlord has used. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts about that are.
I think it's a brilliant idea. The pre-checkout inspections is an absolute brilliant idea. Basically because the amount of times you would do a checkout and the tenants would say, well, if you let me back in the property, I could have done this, this and this, to cut out wee silly things. Another good thing is a lot of agents aren't keeping the tenants or the landlords up to date with what needs to be done. So, for an example, the carpets might have been newly laid at the start of the tenancy. The tenants aren't aware of what they need to do for the checkout stage. So that pre-checkout will actually give them that idea, they will be informed of what needs to be done for the checkout for the individual property. So I think that's brilliant. And again, I think for the pre-checkout, again, that can be used through the Zoom. So even though the inventory clerks aren't being able to get out as much to the properties, as long as they're keeping interactive with their tenants and agents, there's no reason why another video can't be done to help guide the tenants in the right direction whilst doing the report.
Exactly. So I think there's loads of potential options, and certainly this pandemic, this COVID, has made us all think a bit more laterally, thinking more outside the box, involve technology a lot more. But also, I think it's made us realise that we need to support each other better, and also support tenants, because at the end of the day, we're all part of the lettings process in regards to tenant letting, the agents and what they need to do, us as providers. We all need each other to be part and parcel of that process. And I think the more support and of options and advice that we can provide will make that whole journey so much better for everybody concerned. So I think certainly for me, it's certainly made me think more out of the box and think of what else we can actually be doing, rather than just focusing just on that report.
That's it. And I think a big thing at the moment with this is communication.
Yes.
And I think that's what is making everyone understand. It is all about communication. And again, over here in Northern Ireland and Ireland, that is one thing the agents and inventory clerks don't have with their clients. And that's probably where I stand different from other rental companies over here, because communication is kind of my number one. and it seems to be working and it's doing well. But I think that is where over in the UK mainland will help inventory companies. So there is still things need to be done, and a lot of it is going to now be more communication rather than actually just arriving at the property, doing the job and leaving. And all the communication is going to be pre-inspection. And as long as the communication is correct, and if an inventory clerk does have to go into a property to do an inspection at the current time, everything can be done. And again, if a video is done, I know that takes slightly longer, but if that means you can do the inspection, a video, and then that stops any contact and two people in the same property at one time, then I think that is what needs to be done at this current position.
Well, it's definitely food for thought, certainly, but I think it's going to be interesting to see certainly how we all then behave and act and work together post-pandemic, because at the moment everyone's very supportive, but what is going to be telling is whether we can maintain that going forward. And I think it's made people rethink, I think, generally about life, but also about working practices, and that there's more options out there. And again, as you said, the communication side of it is definitely been something that's, I think, really come to the fore, because again, we wouldn't even be having these conversations now unless it was for the pandemic. So hopefully that's something positive and constructive we can take out of this whole situation. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of works out. So, Antony, thank you so much for talking to me. I think that it's been a brilliant conversation. I think there's some, or certainly for me, a lot of things to think about, and I'm really looking forward to working with you and seeing how we can get Northern Ireland up and running with InventoryBase and the Academy.
Yes, definitely. And unfortunately, one-on-one meetings with the agents has kind of been ruled out, but I'm doing a lot of things here in the background at the moment just to set up once we can get the pandemic over and done with and get back to normal. I'm trying to arrange to meet several agents, and obviously it's given me a chance to put forward the importance of inventories and things like that. So at least they've got a good heads up before we actually get to meet each other. So yeah, fingers crossed, it will be a good venture going forward.
Well, again, we're going to have to touch base once we're a bit further in and see how things are going, and see what other little nuggets of information and advice you have for us.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Antony. Good luck with everything, and we'll speak again soon. And thank you for joining us. And if anybody else on the podcast listening in would like us to maybe tackle a certain subject, or would even like to co-host with me and talk about things that are important to you as an inventory provider, as an inventory professional or property professional, I would love to hear from you. All of our contact details will be shown along with this podcast, so have a look. If not, you can always contact me at sián@inventorybase.com. Well, again, thank you very much indeed, Antony. Thank you for everybody for listening, and look forward to catching up with you all again on our next podcast with the Inventory Professional. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Inventory Professional Podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, subscribe to our podcast now and share the love. This podcast was brought to you by InventoryBase, providers of industry-leading property inspection software, accredited training, and on-demand property reports.